There's nothing more destructive to the earth and environment than mining phosphate.
This is setting up to be a disaster, the scale and the likes of which the entire planet has never seen. You think a nuke is bad, you think Chernobyl is bad, you think the BP oil spill is bad. This could spell the end of life as we know it on planet Earth if we continue to let this happen.
Manatee County wants to dump 500 million gallons of radioactive toxic waste into Tampa Bay. 480 million gallons of radioactive phosphogypsum. We're talking about Chernobyl, Katrina, BP oil spill, disaster of epic proportions. And the fat cat executives that own Piney Point have been mismanaging the plant for so long, for decades. Spill after spill, inspection after failed inspection, they have failed to take the proper precautions. And after making millions in profit, now they want to dump their radioactive waste into your backyard.
Before wastewater at the Piney Point phosphate plant could spill into Tampa Bay earlier this year, the Department of Environmental Protection came up with a solution. Spread the water over 200 square miles in the Gulf of Mexico.
So what it means is that starting December 1st, millions of gallons a day of effluent from Piney Point is going to go into Bishop's Harbor and then into the bay.
Environmental officials say the wastewater is treated and does not pose a threat.
It could cause substantial problems, and it's a risky business, and obviously they've decided to take that risk, but we locally did not want them to take that risk.
Jan Platt says dumping in the Gulf was safe because it was so far away, a point of view the Sierra Club does not agree with, but they don't want it to be discharged into the bay either.
EPA's decision today is the first step to coming up with a long-term plan that will dispose of that wastewater in a clean way, in an environmentally friendly way.
And Lloyd, this is a story that really began more than 50 years ago.
That's right, Chris. It began back in the 1960s when they came up with the plan to build the plant, and it didn't take long for the controversy to begin.
Piney Point is located in one of the worst possible locations you could have in the state of Florida. It's adjacent to Tampa Bay. It's near Bishop's Harbor, which is outstanding Florida water, which is supposed to be protected.
Officials now say the possibility of a large-scale breach or collapse of the gypsum stack is growing. They say teams are now treating the water that remains in the leaking gypsum stack before it is released.
Well, there's some good news tonight. There were reports of a possible second breach at Piney Point, and also water quality and testing has shown that the water is not radioactive.
26 pumps and 10 vacuum trucks should be up and running by Monday night with the capacity to remove 100 million gallons of water a day. The goal is to prevent the gypsum stack from collapsing, causing an uncontrolled release of water. If all goes well, the gypsum stack at Piney Point could be drained within 2 days. Then Congressman Vern Buchanan says Piney Point will be cleared out once and for all.
I want the best and the brightest on the ground. This is something that's unfortunately could have been dealt with probably over the years, but I'm not looking to assess any blame or anything else.
And as this potential threat is lessened, the congressman says now attention will be placed on the bay, where all that water is being dumped and the potential impacts that could be seen.
I want to be hopeful, optimistic, but just the fact that we're running water into the Tampa Bay is not a great thing and not a great place to be at. But the reality of it is, it seems like it's the right thing to do right now.
The FAA cites hazards in its release. This means no helicopters or drones can fly from 7 in the morning until 8 in the evening. We are working to find out more.
Okay, so let me get this straight. It's hazardous to fly a drone or a helicopter above Piney Point, but it's perfectly okay to dump 200 million gallons of toxic water into Tampa Bay without giving the public any warning to not swim. People were swimming in this toxic water for months, and city and state officials didn't say anything to anyone. They didn't put up signs. They didn't say that there was a leak. They didn't say that there was a spill. They just didn't tell people.
Right now, it's just a partial breach as crews continue to pump that contaminated water out of the leaking retention pond, hoping to prevent a collapse.
But they're hopeful, following the latest update from the county, that things are looking up.
Manatee County now has a waterfall, and we also have a canyon in Manatee County, but it's under control.
It's really hard not to get emotional when our government is directly lying to our faces. This is something that makes me so mad and so disgusted, I can barely put it into words. So I'm just gonna let it speak for itself. Please, if you live on planet Earth, if you have even a shred of sympathy, you need to watch this video and be aware of what's going on.
Environmental officials say the wastewater is treated and does not pose a threat.
Officials say the wastewater is treated and does not pose a threat.
Scoop after scoop after scoop. After a boat fills up, it unloads the dead fish into a large dumpster that will be taken to the county landfill.
The white stuff you see right there are all dead fish.
Incredible, bro. It's everything. They're so desperate to get rid of the problem at Piney Point and Mulberry, so they decide to sell the land. Dirt cheap. The land, the facilities, the containment pool, all of it, and they offer legal immunity to the company that will take the property from them. Florida basically says, take this property, dirt cheap, and if there's a spill, don't worry about it, we'll figure it out. So here come the current owners, HRK Holdings, Mosaic.
Well, this massive sinkhole opened up in Polk County 3 weeks ago, and since then, potentially radioactive water has been pouring into the Florida aquifer.
We know that the contamination has not migrated beyond the immediate area of the water loss incident, so there's not a urgency.
That means, according to Mosaic, none of the contaminated water left the property. It's being pumped back from the aquifer into their own wells.
It's not migrated beyond the immediate area of the water loss incident.
What did Tampa Bay look like shortly after the 200+ million gallons of toxic water was dumped into Tampa Bay? Oh yeah, we had more dolphins, manatees, sea turtles, and sea life die in a few months than in several previous years combined. What about the other 25 gypsum stacks across Florida? What about the 2 that are also adjacent to Tampa Bay that Mosaic built? What about those 2? What are we gonna do about that? How are we gonna dispose of that water? When that one starts leaking, are we just gonna dump that into Tampa Bay too? Here's an article foreseeing one of the biggest disasters in the history of Florida from 2003, talking about Piney Point. Our government officials have been aware of this for over 20 years. So we saw this coming. We knew that this was going to happen. We knew that this was a problem in the future, and nothing was done until Piney Point was breached and there was worries about catastrophic flooding. So to prevent flooding, we dumped over 200 million gallons of toxic sludge into Tampa Bay. What about the other 25 phosphogypsum stacks across the entire state of Florida? What about the several sinkholes that have opened in other gypsum stacks? What about the hundreds of millions of gallons of toxic water that's already been dumped into the Florida aquifer? What about the 50 million gallons of water that was dumped into the Alafai River that killed every single fish within 50 miles? This has happened before. This is going to happen again, and nothing is being done about it. Anywhere in the state of Florida is equally as terrible of a place for these stacks because the Florida aquifer and the water table is too shallow. So these stacks are gonna fail. It is bound to happen. They are ticking time bombs and they will destroy Florida as we know it. If all of these stacks fail, which is inevitable over time, we will see a catastrophe the likes of which the entire planet has never seen.
Manatee County now has a waterfall, and we also have a canyon in Manatee County.
That guy for making a joke about there being a new waterfall and a new canyon in Manatee County when there is a disaster the likes of which we've never seen in Florida unfolding directly in front of us. I really do my best not to get emotional when I make videos, but it's so hard for me to not be just the most mad that I've ever been in my entire life. I've screamed about this, I've cried about this, and there's a video that I found about one guy talking about it who doesn't hold anything back, so I'm just gonna let him say what he wants to say.
Because they're too greedy to handle the situation differently. They want to dump it in your beautiful Tampa Bay. They want your kids to swim and kayak in a pesticide-filled swamp. Okay, this is a disaster of epic proportions. Code red. You could drive down right now, I-75. Go take a look for yourself and witness a Chernobyl-level catastrophe in the making. It's that kind of mess. This disaster has been brewing for years. Everybody knows it. The local media, the government, the owners of the plant. It's not a secret. Just Google it. You can see for yourself. Article after article. So I have a theory. I believe these people wanted this spill to happen. I don't care how much the executives cry or pretend that they never wanted this day to come. I'm calling bullshit. This is a spill they have been planning for a long time now, and I'm gonna tell you how. To understand my theory, I have to share with you the history. And if you're paying attention, it's gonna piss you off. Florida makes 60% of America's phosphate. Phosphate mining and filtration and chemical treatment for fertilizer production. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry, and Florida produces 60% of it. Piney Point phosphate plant started, it was born in the 1960s, and it was owned by a company called Royster. Royster mined the phosphate all over the state and then transported it to this chemical treatment plant at Piney Point. That's what the treatment plant was. That's what Piney Point is. And at this plant, they would filter the phosphate through pools of water and chemicals in order to separate the fertilizer from the phosphate. And they succeeded. They made millions of dollars. But they had an issue. Just like every other phosphate mining company, they had an issue. The problem was that this process leaves behind radioactive waste in the form of phosphate gypsum. A sludge of phosphate gypsum, and they don't know what to do with it because there's no way to dispose of it. You can't repurpose it, you can't build roads or make drywall out of it. Why? Because it's toxic, it's radioactive, it's a sludge, it's waste. So what does Royster Company do? They just leave it outside. They leave it outside and they stack it on top of each other. And over the years, those stacks turn into mountains. But the problem with leaving a mountain of radioactive phosphogypsum outside is that it's exposed to the environment. The wind blows and takes the phosphate with it into the air your children breathe. The rain comes and drains the phosphate away into the aquifer and the streams and the rivers that you love to swim in and drink from. So what did Royster and other phosphate companies do? They built dikes and dams and berms, retention ponds, a big pool. And at the bottom of these pools, they lined them with plastic to keep the waste from seeping into the ground. So they basically put these mountains of phosphogypsum, radioactive phosphogypsum, into containment pools, and they prayed to God that it wouldn't leak into the ground. It's a horrible idea to start with, but it's the best they could do. So as long as they maintain the plastic lining and the pools, they'd be okay. But guess what? It's plastic! And it's radioactive sludge, not regular pool water. So it eats away and damages the plastic, and that plastic rips and that sludge leaks into the ground. And that's what happened at Piney Point and at Mulberry, its sister plant. And it's happened for decades. Leak after leak, spill after spill, accident after accident. In 1989, there was a leak so bad that an entire area, the entire surrounding area had to be evacuated. A cloud of toxic fumes filled the air and traveled inland. And that was the last straw for Royster. They got fine after fine after fine until they had to declare bankruptcy. After 2 decades of making millions of dollars off of poison, they finally went under. And why did they go under? They filed bankruptcy so they could get out of paying the fines. Now a new company comes in, Mulberry Company. They step in, they purchase the land and all of its phosphate and the containment pools, and the CEO says they will improve it and they'll never allow a spill to happen again. What happens? Less than 3 years later, Mulberry has a major accident. A dam breaks and leaks 50 million gallons of toxic sludge into the Alafaya River. Everything was destroyed, millions of fish gone. Florida decides to hit Mulberry Corporation with a $140 million fine. What does Mulberry do? They don't give a crap. They don't want to pay. Sorry, we're bankrupt. That's what they do. They file for bankruptcy and they run off with their millions of dollars. Meanwhile, Florida not only has to clean up the mess, but they have to take over Piney Plant, this contaminant waste zone. and Mulberry plant, and they have to spend tens of millions of taxpayer dollars to sustain it and prevent further leaks. All these phosphate companies, they all do the same thing. They make money by making a mess, and then they skip town and file bankruptcy before having to pay the fines, before having to take the consequences. Royster has toxic leaks, they declare bankruptcy in 1993. Mulberry has toxic spills, and they declare bankruptcy in 2001. And what did Florida do about it? What did the DEP of Florida do about it? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. For years, taxpayers had to pay for Piney Point and Mulberry. Those same executives, they went somewhere else and started another mess. They keep making their millions by making a mess. That's what they do. They make money, make a mess, and dump it onto the people that live there. After Florida takes over the mess, 4 years of wasting taxpayer money, tens of millions of dollars. They're so desperate to get rid of the problem at Piney Point and Mulberry, so they decide to sell the land. Dirt cheap. The land, the facilities, the containment pool, all of it, and they offer legal immunity to the company that will take the property from them. Florida basically says, take this property, dirt cheap, and if there's a spill, don't worry about it, we'll figure it out. So here come the current owners, HRK Holdings, Mosaic. Did someone say cheap property and legal immunity? Here they come. HRK takes Piney Point, Mosaic takes Mulberry. Mosaic sounds familiar, doesn't it? You know why? Because 3 years ago they went viral. They dumped 215 million gallons of toxic waste into a sinkhole that polluted the Florida aquifer. 215 million gallons directly into your drinking supply. So these two companies, Mosaic and HRK Holdings, they manage these phosphate contamination catastrophe zones, and they have a free pass from the government. It's a ticking time bomb, but they don't care because it's so cheap, and the government won't do anything, nothing to hold them accountable. It's easy money, it's a no-brainer. Fast forward to 2020, inspectors visit Piney plant, and they tell HRK, hey, you guys have a serious problem here. The plastic lining is old, and it's ripping apart, and the toxic sludge is leaking. If you don't fix it, this place is going to blow. They told them that a year ago. Let me explain another aspect of this. The pools, okay, can only contain so much water before they start overflowing. So what do these guys do? They bring trucks, they fill the wastewater into the trucks little by little, they transport them to ships. Those ships travel far out into the Gulf of Mexico, and they dump the wastewater into the ocean. It's not their problem anymore. It's the Gulf of Mexico's problem. It's disgusting, but they don't care. But, of course, there's an issue. They can't drain the pools fast enough. Because every year, it rains. And when it rains onto the mountain of radioactive phosphogypsum, and it creates more toxic water. So the rain is filling up the pools faster than they can drain it. It's a serious issue that requires a serious solution. But a serious solution will probably cost serious money. Money, that's all it is. So when the inspectors tell HRK, you have a serious problem with your plastic, it's gonna leak, and if you don't fix this, it's gonna blow. HRK, you know what they heard? Opportunity. Listen carefully. This is why I say they've been planning this dump. Because for decades, the government and all these companies have been sitting on a ticking time bomb. You can read it in the articles from 20 years ago. Article after article, spill after spill, warning after warning, inspection after failed inspection. There has been a warning of an impending catastrophe for years. So this is not a new or unexpected situation. HRK company knew about this the day that they bought it. The state of Florida knew about it the day that they sold it. And last year, the inspectors told them this day of reckoning is near. But instead of building silos to contain the toxic waste, or ramping up the effort to dump the waste in a secure place, or finding a way to deal with it, the company decided to do nothing. They waited for a leak, and now they're telling everyone. If we don't dump 500 million gallons into the ocean, it's gonna keep leaking and get worse. What's worse than 500 million gallons dumped into the river, into the bay? They are using this opportunity to create fear and force you to consent to dumping 500 million gallons of radioactive toxic waste into your ocean, your river, your aquifer, your backyard. This is the conspiracy. This is the crime. They want to dump the entire pool of waste because it means they buy themselves more time to fill it back up and restart the process in 20 years. They knew the plastic lining was failing. They knew that the day they bought it. They knew it last year when the inspectors told them. 365 days of a heads up, and they decided to do nothing because it meant saving money. They did nothing because they knew they had legal immunity. Why should they do anything? What are the consequences? We don't live here. It's not our water. Right next to Piney Point plant is Manatee County Jail. Those pieces of garbage executives should walk their asses straight from the plant into the jail because that's exactly where they belong. They're a sick, lying, greedy mafia that don't live here in Florida. They travel all around the world and they copy-paste this process. The snook is under threat of extinction. I can't fish snook because these fertilizer companies owned by people that don't live here can't stop polluting the water. Hundreds of millions of gallons of waste destroying our environment, our home, our land, our place that we love, we visit, we swim in, we drink water from. We aren't dumb. We know it's complicated. But guess what? If you can't solve it, then stop creating the problem in the first place. Stop the phosphate mining. Stop the fertilizer production. They should have never given a green light to do whatever they want. They should have demanded that whoever inherits this land and its facilities has to fix the problem. Not say, we hope you do, and if you don't worry, no consequences.